Welcome to Quill Sword Blogcast. Maricopa County. Why Democrats Cheat. There are polls you will never see. These are done on the behalf of campaigns. Campaigns spend a whole lot of money on these. That doesn't mean that they don't have issues because all modern polling has issues, but it does mean that they should be far more accurate than the garbage aired on the news every night. These polls are done early and often. They are used as a guide to the strategic planning of a campaign. Okay, that sounds worse than it is. Polls can be a great way to find out what's really important to your constituency right then. Knowing that lets a campaign tailor its messaging to address the public's actual concerns. Okay, it also lets a corrupt campaign tailor its message to get votes rather than telling the truth of what the candidate intends to do in office. There's always a rotten apple somewhere. Either way, polling is a standard part of modern campaigning. You are no doubt aware of the highly credible allegations of voter suppression in Maricopa County, Arizona. At the very least, you must know that some 70 polling places, all within Republican districts, had malfunctions and problems with their equipment, resulting in many people being unable to see their votes tabulated, and some likely unable to vote at all. Seriously, you haven't? You don't get out much, do you, dear? For pity's sake, stop just watching CNN and Fox. This one is already in the courts. At least one certification has been called into question as a Mojave County official voted aye under duress. Literally, that was his vote. And stated in the formal meeting that he had been threatened with arrest if he voted against the certification. For the record, if that allegation is true, the certification is invalid. The Arizona Attorney General has demanded Maricopa County explain itself, which the county has resisted. The Republican gubernatorial candidate has begun lawsuits. The Democrat gubernatorial candidate, and presumed winner, is also the official in charge of elections in Arizona, the Secretary of State, and she refused to recuse herself despite the pretty obvious conflicts of interest here. And a Republican county is refusing to certify the election results. Looks like a transparent and competent election to me. Oh, sorry about the sarcasm dripping on your shirt. Here, try a little bleach. It will come right on out. Yappers, this mess is headed for the federal courts. Trump put a lot of federal judges on the bench, so it may not be a foregone conclusion. Regardless, it's a disaster, and the election should be rerun with Hobbs forcibly recused by the state courts. That won't happen, but it should. Now let's get back to the title of this piece. Why do Democrats cheat? I am assuming for this hypothetical that Democrats do cheat and on a fairly large scale. I am not assuming that Republicans are saints, because they aren't, but that their cheating is on a smaller scale, at least for now. Look, there are over 20,000 governments within the United States. Yes, school boards count. So the idea that there is no cheating anywhere is just insane. We can and should minimize the opportunity to cheat as much as possible and punish the offenders. But even if we did that a lot better than we're doing it right now, we will never bat 1,000. So, with that out of the way, why all the cheating, Democrats? For most people, this probably isn't all that obvious because we've been told that Democrats outnumber Republicans, so we kind of expect them to win, right? When the Democrats were a party of the working man and the middle class, this was very likely true. Certainly all of the stats supported it. But that was 40 years ago. The Democrats are the party of the oppressed and the ultra-wealthy, neither of which are particularly large groups relative to the working people and the middle class. But urbanites are usually Democrats, right? That's the story. But with most polls increasingly unreliable and voter turnout anything but impressive in most years, Was it really true all this time? It certainly was once. But look at where the Republicans had the most upsets this last election. It's all in Democrat strongholds: California, Illinois, and New York. Wait, what? Remember that polls leading into the last election showed a Republican advantage, but not in the strongholds where the most upsets were. Why? Here's what I think might be going on. If you're Bob and you work at Goofle in San Francisco, odds are you don't tell anyone that you are thinking about switching parties. If you were already a Republican, you are sure as heck never going to tell anyone about it. That includes the annoying pollsters, especially annoying campaign pollsters. You don't want your boss finding out. You tell the nice young lady on the phone that of course you're voting D. Can't be too careful. Never know who might hear. But in a voting booth with no one looking, you check R and toss the thing in the tabulator as fast as humanly possible. One or two bobs won't make a difference, but thousands add up pretty fast. Further, if, and this is a huge if, this is speculation on my part, but if, as I suspect may be the case, Democrats have been on a frog boiling campaign since the 2000 election. What? Oh, sure, I can explain. You really need to watch something other than MSNBC sometime. Anyway, frog boiling refers to the adage that the way to boil a frog is to turn up the heat so it's very slowly that he doesn't notice until it's too late. Of course, you could buy a pot with a lid, or better yet, stop being the kind of jackass that boils live frogs in the first place. Anyway, back on topic. If Democrats are truly growing in membership, then their small donations should also be growing. But that doesn't seem to be happening. Large donations, sure. Little ones, occasionally. But the just right small ones, not so much. This is an indicator, not proof, that something ain't quite right. The problem with cheating sporadically is that you don't get good at it, and it sticks out like a sore thumb when you do it. The solution is to cheat in safe districts to start with. Yeah, sounds silly, but there's a method to the madness. You get to practice and figure out where you're making mistakes and a much reduced risk of getting caught by people who will actually want you prosecuted. Uh, that's more bonus than benefit, however. The benefit is in the numbers. As your safe blue district becomes good grief, that's insanely blue, the public doesn't question the constant lopsided results. As they get used to that, you can start cheating in the heavily leans blue adjacent districts because the public will not be surprised when we see nearby districts become more solidly blue as yours. Over time, more districts that were blue become at least safe blue. Now the fun begins. Purple districts are the trickier ones. Are there are people there who won't let your little adventure in political corruption just slide. But in a hotly contested race where there are nearby solid blue districts, the public is unlikely to become alarmed when your underdog candidate manages to squeak by and win. You then play the victim when the red side starts complaining about irregularities, and with your faithful media lapdog by your side, you walk away unscathed. Until you don't. Done a little and selectively, a party can get away with this, especially if the media isn't doing its job for quite some time. But Lincoln was right. You cannot fool all of the people all of the time. Eventually, you overplay your hand. That brings us back to motive. Why do that if most people are identifying as Democrat? What if they aren't? Political inertia is a powerful force, but it's not invincible. People do change parties. People change their minds. Most become more conservative as they age, hippie baby boomers notwithstanding. Parties can drive away even their own base. Politics is just people making decisions in groups. It would be weird if political views were static. Remember those polls I told you about at the start? What happens in a solid blue area? In the current political climate, this is observed in a lot of different circumstances for the record. I guess they'd get solid blue results even if the results weren't accurate and the pollsters were doing a good job. It is very hard to get scared people to even opt into a poll. People with very political in or people rather who are living in very political environments, professional or social, are likely to duck pollsters unless they share those politics. The apolitical and the opposition are going to skip this. That skews the results. If Bob does answer, he likely lies. This, too, is pretty commonly observed. So, if the polls that were well done and the elections due to cheating are all pointing blue, how would a party spot a shift in the electorate? They wouldn't. They find out when they lose a solid blue and safe seat. This is the pattern we observed in the midterms. That is not proof, but it is evidence for those still stuck on whether or not Democrats cheat. But what about leaning seats? Wouldn't polls see a shift there? Yes, they would. But those are private, unreleased polls that only campaigns have an access to. In less monolithic districts, you can still run into trouble getting people to answer a poll, but fewer from just being plain scared. Most people are with divergent political views in that environment are more likely to answer. It may be, or it may still get skewed, but at least the indication is likely to be there. And the less monolithic, the more indicative. I suspect the Democrats have been seeing this trend for decades. Mind, there are other ways to spot the trends, and yes, that does include polling, which are indicative of the same trend away from Democrats. Analysis of some Democrat policy changes over the years seems to point in the same general direction. People are moving away from the Democrat Party, and the Democrats know it. Bill Gates can buy you a lot of media attention, but he can only vote once. The near destitute are not reliable as a voter base. The school board isn't their main concern when they have to get assistance or a job. Even if there were large numbers of people in these groups, they can never be large enough, and Bill may be in the Bahamas that month. The Democrats built a big tent on the coattails of the civil rights movement. Suddenly, every minority was aggrieved and needed white liberals to speak up on their behalf. It worked for a very long time, until Obama pulled the rug out from under it. Now all those utterly incompatible groups wanted their moment in the sun. Some parents might fall into the trap, but most moms don't want boys in their daughter's bathroom. Once the soccer moms began to question, the end had begun. Why do Democrats cheat? Because they've reached the point where they cannot win without it. This is what a party in collapse looks like as it desperately claws to remain in power. And why Maricopa County is a national disgrace. Seriously, printer ink? How desperately stupid can you be? Oh, right. Democrat.